The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. But I barely noticed. My attention was fixed on the elderly couple in the waiting room. Putting on what I was starting to suspect was quite a performance. Oh, the pain. Eleanor Thompson clutched her chest, wincing dramatically. Richard, I don't think I can wait much longer for that surgery. Richard, my father-in-law, patted her hand while shooting me an accusatory glance. Try to hold on, dear. I'm sure Amanda will do the right thing. She wouldn't let her mother-in-law suffer, would she? I'm Amanda Thompson, 34, pediatric nurse and recent widow. 6 months ago, my husband Jack died in a mountain climbing accident, leaving me with a substantial life insurance payout and in-laws who suddenly developed an endless series of medical emergencies. Mrs. Thompson, a young resident approached with a clipboard. We can take you for preliminary tests now. Tests. Eleanor's voice rose shrilly, but Dr. Morrison said I needed immediate surgery. The specialist already approved everything. The resident frowned, checking his tablet. I don't see any specialist consult notes in your file. Who did you say? Dr. Morrison, Richard cut in smoothly. Tall fellow, gray hair. He saw Eleanor last week at his private clinic. Amanda, dear, show him the paperwork. I shifted uncomfortably. You never gave me any paperwork. Oh, that's right. Eleanor's hand fluttered to her throat. We were in such a rush with the emergency. But Amanda, darling, you can sort out the payment now, can't you? Dr. Morrison said if we don't do the surgery today. The resident looked increasingly confused. Ma'am, there's no Dr. Morrison on staff at St. Mary's. He's a private specialist, Richard explained, his voice taking on the condescending tone I'd grown familiar with. Very exclusive. Amanda, the surgery deposit is only $50,000. Surely Jack would want you to help his mother? Jack's name hit me like a physical blow, just as they knew it would. They'd been playing that card repeatedly since the insurance check cleared. I need to make a phone call, I said, stepping away from their expectant faces. Once around the corner, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. St. Mary's Nursing Station. This is Maria. Maria, it's Amanda Thompson. Listen, I need a favor. Can you look up any records for Eleanor Thompson? She's claiming she needs emergency surgery, but something feels off. Maria had been my mentor when I first started at St. Mary's. Now her voice turned serious. Give me a minute. That's odd. The only record I see for Eleanor Thompson is from 3 months ago. Routine blood pressure check. No surgical consults, no specialist referrals. My suspicions deepened. What about prescriptions? Nothing recent. Wait, there is a note here from Dr. Chen. He tried to schedule her for a follow-up appointment, but she kept canceling. I thanked Maria and ended the call, my mind racing. This wasn't the first time my in-laws had claimed to need emergency medical care since Jack's death. There had been Richard's critical heart condition that mysteriously resolved when I asked to speak directly with his doctor. Eleanor's urgent hip surgery that was somehow cured by a weekend at the spa. Paid for with my credit card, of course. But this was different. They were in an actual hospital now, making claims that could be verified. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. The hospital needs the deposit now. Don't make us beg. Another message followed quickly. Jack would be ashamed of your hesitation. After everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me, right? Like trying to talk Jack out of marrying a mere nurse when they'd expected him to marry someone from their social circle. Like criticizing my choice to keep working after marriage instead of letting Jack take care of me properly. Like showing up at my door 2 weeks after the funeral, crying about unpaid medical bills that never seemed to have any actual documentation. I walked back to the waiting room, where Eleanor was now describing her symptoms to a concerned-looking nurse. The performance was impressive. Shortness of breath, chest pain, weakness. All the right buzzwords to get immediate attention in an ER. Mrs. Thompson, the nurse was saying, these symptoms are concerning. We should run some tests. No, Eleanor sat up too quickly for someone in severe pain. I mean, Dr. Morrison already did all the tests. We just need to schedule the surgery. Amanda, dear, did you sort out the payment? The nurse turned to me, recognition dawning in her eyes. Amanda Thompson, from pediatrics? Hello, Susan, I smiled grimly. Yes, my mother-in-law seems to need emergency surgery, prescribed by a Dr. Morrison who apparently doesn't exist. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Richard stood quickly. Now, Amanda, Let's not be hasty. Perhaps we're confused about the doctor's name. I don't think you're confused at all, I said quietly. I think you know exactly what you're doing. Just like with the heart condition last month and the hip surgery before that. Eleanor dropped all pretense of pain, her face hardening. We're your family. You have all that insurance money just sitting there, while you what? My voice was steady, though my hands shook. While you lie about medical emergencies, while you try to manipulate me using my dead husband's name. Is there a problem here? Dr. Sarah Chin, the ER attending physician, approached our group. I recognized her from hospital staff meetings. Actually, I said, straightening my spine, I believe my in-laws are attempting to commit medical fraud, and I'd like to file a formal complaint. The next hour passed in a blur of security reports and administrative meetings. Eleanor and Richard protested loudly, but their story fell apart under basic questioning. No, they couldn't provide Dr. Morrison's contact information. No, they had no documentation of previous tests. No, they couldn't explain why Eleanor's supposed emergency symptoms vanished as soon as fraud was mentioned. In the hospital administrator's office, I finally learned the full scope of their deception. They've tried this at 3 other hospitals in the past month, the administrator explained, showing me reports from their healthcare network. Each time claiming emergency surgery was needed, always with a non-existent specialist recommendation. They've been targeting recent widows, claiming to be destitute relatives in need of life-saving procedures. My hands trembled as I read the reports. How many people did they scam? At least 4 that we know of. But you're the first one with actual medical knowledge who could spot the inconsistencies. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Richard. You've made a terrible mistake. We can still fix this if you just cooperate. I showed the message to the administrator, who frowned. We'll need to contact the police. Medical fraud is a serious crime. Good, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Because I have a lot more evidence at home. And I think it's time everyone knew exactly what kind of emergency my in-laws are really facing. The police detective's office was cramped but neat, her desk covered with files bearing the Thompson name. Detective Sandra Martinez had been investigating medical fraud cases for 15 years, but her eyes widened as she reviewed my evidence. This is extensive, she said, flipping through the documents I brought. You kept records of everything. I'm a nurse, I shrugged. Documentation becomes second nature. Plus, something felt wrong from the beginning. She nodded, pulling out a particularly thick file. You're not the first to notice. We've been tracking Richard and Eleanor Thompson for months, but their previous victims were too embarrassed to press charges. Previous victims? My throat tightened. How many? At least 12 that we know of. She spread out photographs. Elderly women, all recently widowed, all with familiar, desperate expressions. They target grief-stricken widows with substantial insurance payouts. Usually, the scam starts small, urgent dental work, minor surgeries, then escalates to bigger emergency procedures. My hands shook as I recognized one of the photos. That's Helen Parker. She volunteers at the hospital gift shop. They took her for nearly $100,000 before her daughter intervened. Detective Martinez's voice softened. But you're different. You had the medical knowledge to spot the inconsistencies and the courage to come forward. They didn't expect me to check their stories, I said quietly. They thought being a nurse meant I was simple, beneath them. Well, your evidence just broke this case wide open, especially those recorded conversations. I thought back to the small voice recorder I'd started carrying after Richard's mysterious heart condition. Their own words would be their undoing. Of course there's no real surgery, Eleanor had laughed during one family dinner. But the little nurse doesn't need to know that. She's so desperate to please us, to prove she deserved Jack. Mrs. Thompson. A young officer appeared at the door. We found something interesting in their financial records. Detective Martinez reviewed the new documents, her expression darkening. They've been running this scam for years, long before Jack's death. Multiple bank accounts, offshore transfers. Wait. She looked up sharply. Did you know about the life insurance policy they took out on Jack 6 months before his accident? The room spun. What? A $2 million policy separate from your spousal coverage. They were the sole beneficiaries. She hesitated. And there are some irregularities in the accident report. I barely made it to the wastebasket before losing my lunch. The implications were too horrible to contemplate. But deep down, I'd always wondered about that climbing trip. How Richard had suddenly encouraged Jack to take up the dangerous sport. How Eleanor had insisted he go that weekend, despite the bad weather warnings. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. We should talk. Family matters should stay private. I showed the message to Detective Martinez, who nodded grimly. We can use this. Are you willing to help us get a confession? 2 days later, I sat in my living room across from my in-laws. A small recording device was concealed in my shirt, with police officers waiting outside. Really, Amanda? Eleanor sighed, stirring her tea. All this fuss over a simple misunderstanding. We were just trying to help you learn to manage Jack's money properly. By faking medical emergencies, I kept my voice steady. By scamming other widows? Those women were grateful for our help, Richard insisted. We gave them purpose, a way to honor their husbands' memories. Like you honored Jack's memory, I watched their faces carefully. With that extra life insurance policy? The teacup clattered in Eleanor's hand. Richard's face went still. Who told you about that? The police found the policy, along with some interesting emails about Jack's climbing equipment. Now, Amanda, Richard's voice turned soothing. You're imagining things. Jack's death was a tragic accident. Was it? I pulled out my phone, playing a recording from their last hospital visit. Their voices filled the room, discussing their various scams, mocking their victims' grief. Eleanor lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. That's not all I have. The police are very interested in your offshore accounts, and those emails about Jack's climbing rope. You little bitch, Eleanor hissed, dropping her maternal act completely. We gave you everything, social status, family connections, a position in society you never deserved. And this is how you repay us. By exposing your fraud? By investigating my husband's death? Jack was weak, Richard spat. Just like his mother, always wanting to marry for love instead of proper social connections. We had to take control. Take control? My voice cracked. By arranging his death? We didn't arrange anything, Eleanor snapped. We just encouraged certain opportunities. That climbing trip, the weather conditions. Insurance companies call them acts of God. And God paid very well, didn't he? I stood shaking. $2 million in secret life insurance. Plus whatever you could squeeze from other grieving widows. How many lives have you destroyed? We built an empire, Richard said proudly, while people like you, with your simple jobs and simple minds, slave away in hospitals. Wait. The front door burst open. Detective Martinez led a team of officers into the room, their badges glinting in the afternoon light. Richard and Eleanor Thompson, she announced, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and suspicion of involvement in the death of Jackson Thompson. What followed was a media circus. The trial revealed decades of sophisticated fraud targeting vulnerable widows. The investigation into Jack's death uncovered tampered climbing equipment and suspicious insurance policies. Richard and Eleanor Thompson, pillars of society, were sentenced to 15 years for fraud. The investigation into Jack's death continues, but Detective Martinez is confident about additional charges. Their victims came forward one by one, dozens of grieving women they'd manipulated and robbed. We formed a support group, helping each other heal from both financial and emotional trauma. I still work at St. Mary's, now heading a program to help medical professionals identify and report fraud. Every new case reminds me how easily grief can blind us to deception. Last week, I visited Jack's grave, laying fresh flowers beside his headstone. A young widow was there, crying over a recent loss. They said they were his parents' friends, she whispered, describing a familiar-sounding scam. They said they needed emergency surgery. I sat with her, sharing my story, watching understanding dawn in her eyes. Another life saved from predators who prey on grief. The insurance money that Richard and Eleanor coveted, I used it to establish a foundation in Jack's name, helping victims of medical fraud rebuild their lives. Eleanor still writes sometimes from prison. Her latest letter begged for forgiveness, claiming they only wanted what was best for the family. I sent back a single page, the police report detailing how they'd sabotaged Jack's climbing equipment. Haven't heard from her since. The Thompson name, once synonymous with social status, now appears in medical textbooks as a case study in fraud detection. Every nurse I train learns their story, learns to protect patients from predators in caring disguises. Sometimes I wonder if Jack knew what his parents were capable of, if he tried to protect me by keeping me at a distance from their schemes. But mostly, I focus on the future, on building something positive from this tragedy. The foundation helps dozens of families each year, turning victims into advocates. And me? I'm not the naive nurse they thought they could manipulate. I'm stronger now, wiser, determined to protect others from the wolves in family clothing. Because sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't strangers in dark alleys. They're the ones serving tea in your living room, calling you family while plotting your destruction. Jack's real legacy isn't the insurance money his parents killed him for. It's the lives saved by exposing their crimes, the victims protected by telling our story. And that's something Eleanor and Richard, in their prison cells, will never understand.